What's going on, everybody? It is the Cash Show. We're talking NFL cash games for week 1 of the NFL season. We already kind of kicked it off yesterday with a fun game, Chiefs and Ravens, and we got a big one tonight. We're not talking about that game, but I'll kick it over to you, Bryce. It was a fun start to the season. I know I had a profitable night, so it's always good to get some money in there on the first night, and hopefully we can have a fun NFL week 1. But how was the first game for you, and how are you doing today?
I didn't have any likely captain in tournaments, so that kind of sucked. I needed Rice to catch that pass at the end of the game that would have effectively ended it, and then I would have had the nuts then. It was going to be a huge chop though, so it wasn't like a massive sweat or anything. But I thought it was a super entertaining game to get started with. At least didn't love the refs. I kind of felt like they tried to take control of the game early and often. I mean, they were calling so many penalties on the Ravens left tackle. It was like, dude, just let the guys play. It was kind of hard to watch for that part, but other than that, I really enjoyed the game.
Yeah, the refs were hands that were on a little too much, but it is what it is. So I was just happy to watch some football. Overall, it was a good game, but man, I like island games, but there's nothing better than watching Scott Hansen, some red zones, flipping through all the games, and that'll be Sunday. That'll be a lot of fun. Obviously, we'll have you set here with all the content over here at Run Pure Sports, but we're going to talk cash games. I'm sure we won't go the whole hour, and it's good we haven't done too much, right? If we did the show probably 3 hours ago, it would have already been blown up, and who knows if it'll change much. Obviously, we'll make adjustments on the content. If you are looking for the cash game stuff, it'll be on the playbook over at Run Pure Sports. We have some tags that'll be up there, and then we'll have a cash core on the core plays page. So it won't be like it was in the past where there's a cash chart that just says everything on it. You'll have a DK core, you'll have a FanDuel core, and then on the playbook, you'll have some rankings, and it'll say fade in the pool 1 through 5. So good content over there with that. And Bryce, let's dive in and talk about this slate. Obviously, we're talking FanDuel and DraftKings, but on DraftKings specifically, quarterback is going to be, there's some easy, obvious values in my opinion. I think quarterback ownership will be spread out in tournaments. I don't know about cash games. I think they could be a little bit spread out in cash games if we just have kind of money to spend with however way we want. I know Anthony Richardson looks like the guy I think people are going to go to. He's going to be in a dome game, running quarterback. Seems kind of cheap at 6,300. Do you kind of see the same thing, or how do you see quarterback breaking down this week?
I think it's kind of on DraftKings, at least it's Richardson and then everyone else. I think you can make a case for Caleb Williams at 5,900. He has a lot of upside too. I think he's a better play on FanDuel. I think he's 7,100 there. If you want to spend up, I think it's Allen. And, I think you will have money to spend this week. It's just kind of where do you want to spend it? For me, it's not quarterback personally, but, I totally get the Allen play if you do want to go there. He just has so much rushing upside. We'll get to receiver in a bit, but I think it's pretty slate dependent. And, it's kind of hard to predict this stuff now. Which Cincy guy and how many Cincy guys is it going to be? T. Higgins isn't going to play. He got listed as doubtful. Jamar Chase is up in the air. Even if he plays, he's likely to be limited. So, you got guys and I would apologize if I butcher his name, but Iovisis and Trenton Irwin would become 2 of the better plays on the slate. And, it really lets you fit some of these studs that we'll talk about. So I personally think it's more of a mid-tier quarterback week on both sites. Preferences right now, at least, are Richardson, DraftKings, and Williams FanDuel would be my 2 leans. But, you can make a case for with the 300-yard bonus, I think you could even make a case for 2 on FanDuel at 7.7K. I think that game's pretty likely to shoot out. Richardson's all the way up to 8,300 on FanDuel. I don't really think he's playable at that price. I would just rather get to Allen at that point. So I think if you do want an Allen share, it is better to get on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement on I think the quarterbacks you mentioned are the quarterbacks people will likely target, but I don't think there's this wide gap of you have to play this guy. There's some slates where you look at and you're oh, if you didn't play this quarterback, it was probably a miss. I think this could be a spot where you could get different in cash games if you really wanted, and I don't think you're giving up that much. I think it just depends on your construction. Like, for instance, if you don't play Yoshi, I think he's the guy. If you don't play him, I think you've missed. You know what I mean? There's certain guys that are like, oh, you missed because you didn't play this guy. Obviously, the Jamar Chase news will be massive, and that will help dictate some of what we're doing and where we're landing with our salary. Because if Jamar Chase happens to play, well, you can make a case to play him and Yoshi together, and then that could change up constructions. But I'm with you. I think Anthony Richardson is the guy. On FanDuel, I typically like to spend up for quarterbacks if I can, especially the running kinds, right? The Josh Allens and such. That's one reason in cash games yesterday, I kind of prioritized Lamar Jackson even more. So, yeah, I think overall you're going to want a running quarterback for sure on FanDuel. And then DraftKings looks like it's going to be Richardson to me, but I think it depends on what value opens up. Let's go over to running backs and talk about that. Typically, running backs are a spot where we kind of get value throughout the week. Guys get banged up and injured all season long. And then it'll be Friday. We get that 4 p.m. injury report. And then we kind of just know, hey, we're likely looking at playing this, 4.5K running back, or maybe there's like a 5.5K guy. There's obviously some good running backs this year too. I think this is a different kind of running back year with some stud options. You got Jonathan Taylor at the top at 7.8K, Bijan Robinson 7.7K, but you also have some other cheap options that we can get to, Bryce. Who are some of the running backs that you're looking at to start off this slate?
I think Bijan's pretty clearly the running back one on this slate for me. It's not the best matchup against Pitt, but he has much improved quarterback play, much improved coaching. That'll actually give him the rock. You see him like going super high in fantasy drafts for a reason. I think he's going to be an absolute workhorse for this team. Guy's an absolute beast when he's healthy. So I really do like Bijan. After him, I don't really think you play Taylor this week. I think you just play Bijan and then kind of drop down. I wouldn't love having Richardson and Taylor on the same team anyways. So I think that makes the decision pretty easy. I don't mind ETN. I mentioned with Tua where I like that game in general, but I think he gets a lot of work for 7.2K. I think it makes a little more sense to drop down to like a Rachaad White at 6,300. Good home matchup against Washington here. You saw him really get there on volume last year, and he remains cheap on both sides. Kamara, at home against the Panthers, I think is a very solid matchup. Only 6.7K there. Don't mind him at all. Kenneth Walker, I think, is a solid play at 6.1. And then you drop down a bit. I don't mind Singletary at 5.7. I would like to pay up at running back this week in general. It's kind of my strategy, and not necessarily for the very top end guys, but I want 3 good running backs in there in general. It's pretty easy to get to with some of this Bengals news that we've gotten. So don't want to cut off any of these like super cheap guys. Like, I don't know. I'm probably going to cut them. It's just hard to make a case for like a Chuba Hubbard over spending like an extra $1,000 and getting like a very solid play. So I think you should be like mid to upper tier running back this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like touchdown equity matters. The situation matters. Like, do I feel confident to say Chuba Hubbard's going to be like, this absolute 3-down back for sure? Like, no, I don't, because I don't know. What if Miles Sanders, they start giving him the ball? Like, I want to target 3-down running back situations that I know are basically, for the most part, guaranteed, right? Like, obviously, you mentioned Kamara. You mentioned Rachaad White, who feels like one of those situations. Kenneth Walker. I think you could put other guys in that conversation. Like, I see DeAndre Swift as a 3-down back, maybe not all game, right? But he's more one than, some other guys that you could find. Like Raheem Mostert's a great example at 6'4". Like, do I like Raheem Mostert in general? Yeah, and I think it's a game that's going to have a lot of scoring, but can I play him when they've got, A-Chain there? No, I just can't, not in a cash game format. I think in Aaron Jones at 6'5", I know Ty Chandler's back there, but I do think Aaron Jones could be a workhorse back that I could get some exposure to at 6.5K. So we want to look at those guys. Like Devin Singletary is a great example you mentioned at 5.7K. Dayball said he's going to get like 80% of the work. Sure, we haven't seen it yet, but you want to target these 3-down back situations where we feel very confident that they're going to get the workload. You're not going to see me go play like a Jalen Warren, Najee Harris situation in cash. There's just no reason to. Javonte Williams, you're not going to see me do that. We want running backs that are in good situations where, they're at home or they're the lead back, or, we got to have all those situations line up. Rashad White's a great example. He's at home against Washington as a favorite, going to get all the work. It's just a really, really good spot for him. Same with Alvin Kamara. At home, leading guy against a bad team like Carolina. It's just a clear-cut spot for sure. So we want to target those situations in cash games. That's going to be very, very important. Let's move on over to the receiver position, which is, it's a clear spot where we know what's going to basically happen. It sounds like we're going to play Bengals. We don't know which Bengals we're going to play. It sounds like we're going to play Yoshi. It sounds like Irwin could be in the conversation. And then Jamar Chase, if he wants to play, he's definitely going to be in the conversation at 7-8. But we don't know if he wants to play yet. He hasn't decided. Who knows? If they somehow get to a contract, decision, maybe he'll play. Honestly, they could get to a contract decision and maybe he doesn't play all the snaps. I don't know what they're going to do. That's going to be important to be in the Discord. It's going to be important to check the updates that we make over at Run Pure Sports. So be sure to get in that Discord and check all that out. And there's a lot of obviously good spots we can get to. If we have all this value, I love the idea of playing Tyreek Hill against Jacksonville. I think that game is going to absolutely shoot out. So that's a fun game. What are the other receivers that you're looking at in cash games? Obviously talk about the Bengals situation, Bryce, but talk about some other options as well.
I think it's pretty easy to go like 1 star, 1 scrub, and 1 mid-range guy at receiver this week. And I think the pretty clear-cut spend here is Tyreek Hill. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's coming off injury, or not injury, like he's coming off of like contract disputes. Same with Chase. Even if Chase plays, he's supposed to be limited, and it wouldn't surprise me if like Lamb was limited in some capacity as well. And it's a shitty matchup on the road against the Browns. So yeah, I think Jefferson's the only other one you can make a case for, and I just see Tyreek as being significantly better to the point where I would like not settle for Jefferson over Tyreek, and I think it's really hard to get both. So I think Tyreek will likely be a core play for us. We'll get these charts up for you guys, but I don't really see any world in which I don't play Tyreek this week. It seems super easy. I think if you were going to fade him, you'd fade him on FanDuel just because, you get really good pricing on some of these guys. Like Drake London, for example, 6.7K. Like, you get Pittman for 6.5K. Like you have a little more mid-range on FanDuel. I think the main mid-range plays for me on DraftKings are kind of centered around Malik Neighbors. He's going to be the number 1 player for this team this year. He's only 5.9K. I think he's a very solid play. I'm not worried at all that he's a rookie. The guy's an absolute beast. I like him a good amount. I think Pickens and McLaurin are good plays as well. I'm just not sure if I'm going to play multiple mid-tier receivers this week, as it's pretty easy to get down to, we'll talk about this more in depth when we get more information, but whether you can play Irwin, Isis, or both. Isis is the Stoneman at 3K. If he starts in this situation, and I'm tentatively expecting him to start right now, I mean, you get, 4 catches for 40 yards is really good at 3K, and he has upside for more than that. Obviously he has downside, but a lot of that's mitigated by the price. I think he's likely my favorite play, cheap at receiver to get some of these studs that we're talking about. So yeah, we'll likely have more information for you guys later on in the week. It's just kind of got thrown into flux today, right before the show with this Bengals news.
Have you seen his FanDuel price yet?
Yeah, 4.3K.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know if I heard you say it. Yeah, so it's like obviously the FanDuel's unlocked the 4K range a little bit more. They used to only be 4.5 was the min, and Irwin is 4.4. I know you mentioned a couple other guys on FanDuel, like London is in that mid tier at 6.7 as an interesting play. There's a couple other interesting things that I should mention, like pricing wise. So
Pittman at 6.5 is a huge price discrepancy between FanDuel and DraftKings. I think Pittman's really solid at 6.5.
Yeah, let me give you a couple more, just because I'm not saying obviously you're gonna like these Bengals, but like if Jamar Chase happens to play, that obviously takes a hit to some of those value Bengals a little bit. And there's just a lot of value on FanDuel in general. Like, here's an example. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is 5'9". Jamison Williams, who's a wide receiver too. I know he's not like, there's Sam Laporta there, but he's 5'8". Another interesting one is 5.6K for Chris Godwin against Washington. Deontay Johnson is 5'6" against the Saints. There's just like a lot of guys in that 5K range that are intriguing, like Khalil Shakir against Arizona, who I don't expect to be a good defense. I mean, he's 5.4K. Brandon Cooks is 5'3". If I told you last year Brandon Cooks was 5'3", you would just be like, that's an absolute steal. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's 5.2K against Denver. You just have some like really intriguing price tags in the 5K range that are clear spots to consider. Like Josh Palmer is a wide receiver 1. I guess it's him or McConkey, right? But I kind of consider it as Palmer right now. He's 5K. There's just like a lot of really cheap price tags on those receivers on FanDuel. I don't know how much you dove into that, Bryce, and I know it'll iron itself out as the week goes on, but what is kind of your thoughts on that, like, interesting pricing that FanDuel has provided us?
I think it's super interesting to get like more dynamic pricing like this from FanDuel. It makes it not quite as cut and dry as we've seen in the past. I think my favorites of them, I know we talked about Neighbors on DraftKings. He's definitely in play on FanDuel as well, 6.3K. I don't hate Godwin at 5.6. We talked about our 4K plays, but I think my favorite one that you mentioned would be Josh Palmer at 5K. If you want to be a little different than the Cincy guys, assuming that we can play them, I think people just totally overlook Palmer here. And he was on my radar before this, but a little bit less after, just because, I'd rather drop down even more if I can. So likely going to be passing on this range, as strong as it may seem. It's just a little tough for me in this spot, but I think tight ends kind of determines what you do with your third receiver spot, because right now I'm kind of pricing in like a Tyreek, cheap Bengal, and then next guy that kind of fits well in my last 2v2 or 3v3. I think the third receiver is a big decision point this week and one of the harder ones to figure out.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's kind of the base build right now that most people would be building with. But I don't know, if Jamar Chase plays, I think it would open it up and make it kind of intriguing to at least have a conversation about. So, and honestly, if FanDuel's going to have this pricing throughout the season, it's going to be something we're going to have to think about, I think, just week to week. It's not going to be, it doesn't seem like this pricing's going away, which I like. I think it's really fascinating for sure. Let's get it in the tight end spot. And also on FanDuel, I want to mention this too. They added the Sunday Night Football game, so that's on the slate. And they have the bonuses now. So it's still, everything else is the same. They just added the bonus for receiving yards, passing, rushing. That's it. So, but it's definitely, it's definitely an important thing to mention, because that's going to help some of these players out, especially someone like a Tyreek Hill. Maybe you might want to jam in the studs a little bit more because of that alone. So, all right, let's get to the tight end position. Sam Laporta is the top tight end on FanDuel. Because he's on the Sunday Night Football game, and then you have he's at 8K, and then you have Kincaid at 6.8, McBride at 6.4 on DK. I mean, the highest tight end is 6.1K. We've seen tight ends get to almost the 8K range on DraftKings, but it seems like we have some loose pricing on the tight ends, and you said it's an important position, Bryce, so talk about it for me.
Yeah, I don't really think Laporta is playable at 8K on FanDuel. I think if you're getting exposure to this game, I'd much rather get it through Amon-Ra Sun God at receiver. I know you're filling a tight end spot, but I just can't pay that for him here. I don't think it's a good use of your funds whatsoever. The tight ends I'm interested in are both in the same game. I think McBride and Kincaid are both really solid options here. McBride is slightly more expensive on DraftKings and slightly cheaper on FanDuel. So kind of the way I was splitting up in my mind is I'll play McBride on FanDuel, play Kincaid on DraftKings. It's kind of the way I had it planned out. I see Taysom Hill's popping in projections. I think that's something I need to look a little bit more at. I hadn't really considered him, but if he's going to have an expanded role with tight end eligibility, I mean, I could get it just kind of depends on some of this other value if you have to go cheaper at tight end or not. And right now, I don't really think you need to. If some of these Cincy guys are out, I think Gesicki's playable, to be honest. If you really wanted to punt the position, Burrow has to have, someone's going to catch balls for Burrow. It's not like Burrow's not going to throw for like 240 yards or something like that. It's still a very good home matchup. So I could see Gesicki being like the preferred absolute punt. I'd like Pitts a little bit before his injury, but I don't think there's any reason to go there this week. I think it's pretty much a spend for me. I could see Ingram in the middle at 5.5K on DraftKings, but at that point, I'd rather just spend up on Kincaid or McBride.
Yeah, it doesn't feel necessary to go to someone like Pitts. I agree. Like the Kincaid McBrides are great. If you are going cheap, the Taysom Hill thing isn't crazy, right? Like he was playing slot receiver in the preseason. He's going to get those crazy goal line carries like he does. He's playing against Carolina. It's an easy matchup in a dome. Like, don't ignore the Taysom Hill thing. It's definitely something we're going to be considering throughout this year. So I thought that was a good point that you brought up there. And yeah, Sam Laporte on FanDuel, I would not be looking at him at 8K. It's just too egregious of a price tag, unless we get some crazy, crazy value that really opens up. I assume you said it earlier, and I'm kind of in agreement too. Three running back week with the flex spot. Would you agree on that?
If we get this value, yes. If we don't get the value, I could see going 3 receivers. Like, I mean, you could make a case for like, I don't know, Neighbors over Singletary, but I don't really think you can make the case for like, I don't know, a Pittman over like a Kenneth Walker type of deal. So yeah, I'm leaning 3 running backs right now, and that could change with some of this news, but I'll be sure to highlight, where my build is leaning on the site.
Yeah, another thing to mention too, like on FanDuel specifically, if we like didn't have value, you could argue playing Josh Palmer as like wide receiver 1 if he's in that wide receiver 1 role for sure. When like your like best bell cow back is like James Conner at 6'1". I'm just like giving the quick scan on my phone, just like seeing without looking at projections, but like that's like kind of one thing with this dynamic pricing. I actually think it could open up flex receivers on FanDuel as the season goes on. I mean, we'll see, but it's just something to kind of think a little bit about. But with Higgins doubtful, it just seems like we're going to have at least one of those values opened up, and we're going to want to consider them for sure. So, but want to keep in mind for like future weeks, the game is always changing and evolving, and we want to change and evolve with it and at least double check and make sure. So, but I'm basically going into the week thinking 3 running backs on FanDuel, 3 on DK as well. We're just going to have enough value to make it work. It's going to be fairly easy, and we'll move on from there. What about defenses, Bryce? And if you guys have questions, fire them into the chat. We are having 2 live streams at the same time. Our guy Jack over here, I'm not going to repeat the rest of the name, of course, but we have 2 streams going on. We're competing against Big T and JSU, talking about the showdown slate. So there won't be as many people viewing right now. We assume they'll be viewing later on, right, Bryce? But talk about defense for us.
Yeah, I mean, defense is probably the one thing that I don't feel like I have a good grasp on right now, just because I'm kind of waiting to see what injury news comes out and like if you can spend a defense. Typically week 1, I never spend a defense. Yeah. I almost always go cheap. You don't get like defenses I want to spend on are like, 2 touchdown favorites. You don't have anyone. I think the Bengals are the biggest favorite on the slate, which is why we're so interested in them. And they're not even that big of favorites. Like they're 7-point favorites. So I don't think you have to spend on defense this week. I personally would not spend on defense this week. I'd rather get a better running back, get a better quarterback, get a better tight end. Get Tyreek Hill. There are luxuries to spend on, and I don't think defense is one of them this week. So I would recommend, playing whatever your build lands on or going cheap. I'll make sure to highlight the defense plays that I'm landing on the most, in my iterations of cash games, when I get there. But it's a little hard for me to say right now just because, I don't really know. Like, normally when we do the show, I have a good idea of the lineup I'm going to play. like I have a good idea of the general build. The only thing I really know right now is I won't be spending on defense. So, cheap defenses to highlight. I think the Chargers are a good play for 2,900. If you want a full punt to position, I don't hate the Commanders. They're only 3.4K. I don't expect them to be as bad as they were last year. I'm even fine with playing like a Panthers style defense. They're only 4-point underdogs. It's not like a crazy discrepancy as to where this team's a 2-touchdown favorite. They're probably going to score 12 points. You should probably play them. It's defense is super random this week, and week 1 is one of the weeks when I actually hate having to choose defenses.
Yeah, and week 1, we don't have Josh McCown going up against an elite defense or something. No one's hurt. You know what I mean? And so the gaps on defense, I always look at the pricing gaps. I think that's important too. Vikings defense, most expensive defense on FanDuel. Cardinals defense, least expensive. And you mentioned the Panthers. They're 3,200 on FanDuel, where, that's definitely interesting with Derek Carr throwing the ball. We know he doesn't throw it too well. So, and then on DraftKings, Cowboys defense, 3,900, most expensive. Least expensive, Cardinals at 2,400 along with the Panthers, and that's a $1,500 gap. So the gap's just not that wide, where it just always makes sense if you can to just punt it. But if we gain more value, then yeah, sure, we'll spend if it's a luxury, right? It's not if we need to spend in other spots though. I'm not sacrificing Tyreek Hill for a top end defense. That just sounds stupid. So make sure you do not do that. But yeah, I think we covered most of it, Bryce. Well, what else do you want to talk about that we missed on this slate? Obviously, it's going to change, and everything hinges on the Bengals stuff, so it's tough.
Just some general stuff week 1. You get this very stringent chalk week 1 normally, and it's normally running backs instead of receivers. You normally get that super cheap running back that's going to be a bell cow that's going to put up 15 points for you regardless that you're normally playing. This year's different because you're going to be going cheap at receiver, not at defense. In general, that's what the optimal build is. So, I think that when you're playing tournaments and when you're playing other games, embrace some more variance on these receiver plays. I don't know, play a Mike Gesicki instead of an Isis or a Trenton Irwin. You can get slightly different and get yourself direct leverage on the field and direct leverage off of some of these higher variance chalk plays that you'll see. Because while they're really good plays in a vacuum, you could easily see Irwin or Isis go 2 for 15. That's definitely within the range of outcomes. It's not like a bell cow back that's going to be getting 20 touches here. So, you're mainly doing it to get the floors elsewhere.
Yeah, and another thing to call out too. I know you and I are big on this, maybe bigger than other people in the industry, but we like to swap. I'm not saying we just go out of our way to do it, but we like to consider it. And we do have the Sunday night football game on the slate, Bryce. And I'm not saying we're gonna play Sunday night football to play it, but Sunday night football has good football games, right? They don't throw on Patriots, they don't typically throw on Patriots versus the I don't know what bad team, the Giants, right? Well, we'll say that's a bad game because that would not be fun to watch. But I'm just saying on FanDuel, that's going to be another thing to think about with, hey, what's the swapping equity on my slate? And it sounded like I saw Scott Hansen say the other day, a week ago, there's going to be more 4:00 games. I don't think we're ever going to be dealt the hand of 2 4:00 games. It sounds like they're going to space it out a little better. We'll see how much better they actually do it. At least on this coming up weekend, we have 4 4:00 games. So, there's 5 games that are starting 4:00 or later, if you include the Sunday night football game. So gaining information is something to think about too. Do you want to talk about anything with that? Because I think it's super important and something that I think about when it comes to tiebreaker scenarios.
I personally love having Sunday night football on the slate. I think I'm pretty much going to be on an island for that take. But every week we drill into you guys, evaluate where you're at against the field. If you're playing these large field double ups, look at the head-to-heads individually. But there's one of the few big remaining edges in DFS is late swap. So I'm not going out of my way, especially this week. Like if we get good chalk at 1 p.m., I'm playing the chalk at 1 p.m. and just hoping for the best. It's week 1. I'm okay doing it. If we get super fragile chalk that I don't want to play, I use it more of a tiebreaker than anything else. Like if you're totally in between a 1 and 4 p.m. guy, you can side with the later guy and give yourself more optionality.
Oh yeah, for sure. And honestly, with like late injury reports too, there might be some value in like backloading for like a receiver at the 4:00 game. And then maybe you get the news early on like an 8 p.m. guy, right? Of like someone being out. So you just don't know. It's definitely something to consider. Someone said he's maxing out the million. How many QBs does he have in mind? This is a cash game show, but that's okay. Bryce, why don't you answer that? I'm okay spreading my QBs out. I'll tell you this week specifically, it sounds like Anthony Richardson is the only quarterback I think that's going to get to double digits. Now, sometimes ownership surprises us. Maybe there's one more that sneaks in that gets a little bit higher, but I think ownership in the millie is going to be super spread at quarterback, where I'm okay with spreading out a bit. How about you?
Probably 8 to 12 would be my sweet spot for QBs, and I would definitely be stacking and running game run backs with them. I know our sims do a really good job of taking care of all that stuff for you, so you don't have to make a billion rules in whatever optimizer you are using. But yeah, I think it's a pretty easy week to narrow it down to, a subset of guys. I would kind of include Allen, Stroud, Tua, Kyler, Richardson, Lawrence, Cousins, Caleb Williams. Honestly, I could even see like a Justin Herbert. These cheap guys don't really get it going for me this week. With all the value, I think it's super easy to spend up on some of the more expensive stacks that are likely to do well.
Yep. It'll be a fun week. I'm excited to, dive into it. So far it's so good. Also, Scotty, this is good too. Hey man, NFL week 1's a little bit random. Like, embrace your own takes. Like, even in your cash games, like, if you see something that you think other people aren't, make sure to embrace that a little bit, right? And dive into it. So that's kind of my overall thoughts on how I would handle it. Got anything else, Bryce, or do you want to just get on out of here?
I think that's pretty much it for me. Kind of tough doing the show this week. Most weeks we normally have an idea of what's going to go on Friday, like what's going to happen Sunday, and then there might be like one update. I wouldn't be surprised if we get like 5 updates, like big updates in between now and Sunday. And, we're definitely getting at least one with the Bengals shit. So, stay flexible. I wouldn't like build too early personally. Like this is going to be more of like a Saturday night, Sunday morning build for me. Enjoy some good football tonight. Hopefully in Brazil, we got you covered for college tomorrow and tonight. Really excited about the college product this year. And yeah, I would just enjoy other football until Sunday and then, kind of figure it out Saturday night, Sunday morning when you have more information.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to go about it. And just use some of the principles we talked about. I think it's super important. And, use the content and it'll help you get to the winner's circle. I'm about to go check out Big T and JSU on the Showdown show. Hopefully you guys check that out as well. But hit that like on the way out too. We would appreciate it. But we're going to get out of here. For me, Mangone, and Bryce. We'll see you guys later.